It was October 1966. The Flamingo Club on Wardour Street smelled like cigarette smoke and ambition in equal measure. Low ceilings, brick walls painted black sometime around 1961, a stage barely large enough to hold 4 people without someone standing sideways. It seated 200 on a good night, and most nights were good nights. The room had a quality that certain rooms possess, the quality of having witnessed enough real music that the walls themselves seemed to know the difference between the genuine article and everything else. The Marcus Webb Group was on the bill for a Tuesday residency. 3 weeks, 4 nights a week. The kind of booking that small London agencies arranged for bands on the way up. They were from Birmingham and they were good. Not extraordinary, but genuinely good. The kind of band that made audiences feel respected rather than merely entertained. Their lead guitarist was a 22-year-old named Tommy Bridges, who had been building a reputation in the Midlands for 2 years and had decided that London was the next step. The only step that mattered. Tommy Bridges had arrived at the Flamingo that Tuesday, believing it was the most important night of his career so far. He had told his mother this on the phone the previous Sunday. He had not told anyone what he was actually feeling, which was the particular terror of a young man who suspects he might be exactly as good as he needs to be, but is not yet certain. He found out by 7 in the evening that he would not be playing that night. The fever had arrived sometime in the early afternoon with the speed and indifference of something that does not negotiate. By 5 o'clock, Tommy was sitting in the backstage corridor with his back against the wall and his Fender Telecaster propped beside him, his temperature high enough that the corridor seemed to shift slightly at its edges. Ray Hollis, the Flamingo's Tuesday night manager, was a compact man with 30 years of experience in rooms like this one. He assessed Tommy in approximately the time it took to ask one question and receive one honest answer. And then he walked to the stage with the walk of a man who has accepted that the evening is now a different evening than the one he planned for. Colin Ashby, the band's bassist, found him at the microphone stand. "What do we do?" Ray Hollis looked at the room, already a third full at 7:15. "We ask," he said. In the 4th row near the left wall, a young man sat alone at a small table with a Coca-Cola in front of him. He had arrived at 8 o'clock, paid at the door, found his seat without speaking to anyone. He was wearing a dark purple jacket with a pattern nobody in London had seen before. Something between military and ceremonial. His hair was large and unruly. He was watching the stage with the focused attention of someone who is in a room to listen and has no other agenda for the evening. His name was Jimi Hendrix. He had been in London for less than 5 weeks. He had come to the Flamingo because someone had mentioned the Marcus Webb Group, and he was trying to understand what the London sound was, where it lived, how it moved. He had arrived with Chaz Chandler and a handful of contacts in the understanding that whatever was going to happen next would begin in rooms exactly like this one. He was 23 years old and had been playing guitar since he was 15. He was not there to be seen. He was there to see. Ray Hollis walked to the microphone at 8:15 and told the room the truth. Lead guitarist, illness, unfortunate situation. He delivered the last part with the slight pause of a man who has accepted that the next thing he says is either going to save the evening or not. "If there's anyone here tonight who plays guitar," Ray Hollis said, "now would be a good time." The room received this with the murmur of people who have been given an unexpected variable. A few looked at the people beside them. 2 people near the bar said something to each other that was probably skeptical. In the 4th row, Jimi Hendrix looked at the stage. He looked at the condition of the room. 200 people who had paid money and taken the tube or the bus or walked through October rain and arrived in this basement expecting to hear something that justified the effort. He put down his Coca-Cola. He stood up. The people near him noticed not because they knew who he was, most of them did not, but because of the certainty of the movement. There was no hesitation in it, no performance of deliberation. He simply stood up, the way a person stands when they have already decided, and the standing is just the body catching up. He made his way to the side of the stage and found Ray Hollis at the bottom of the steps. "I play guitar," Jimi said. Ray Hollis looked at him. "You play guitar?" "I do." "What's your experience?" Jimi looked at him evenly. "Some." Colin Ashby would tell this story for the rest of his life, and the part he always told first was the 5 minutes backstage. Jimi had been handed Tommy's Telecaster, a guitar he had apparently never touched, and spent approximately 45 seconds with it before asking 3 questions. He asked what key they opened with. He asked which song had the solo break in the second verse rather than the third. He asked whether the drummer followed the changes or led them. 3 questions. Colin spent years trying to understand why those 3 questions were exactly right and no others were necessary. The closest he ever came to an answer. Most guitarists in that situation would have asked about the guitar, the amp, the chord shapes. Jimi asked about the room, about how the music moved through the other people on stage. He was asking, Colin finally understood, not how to play the songs, but how to play them with these particular people in this particular place on this particular night. Ray Hollis returned to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we found our man, the Marcus Webb Group, with a special guest on lead guitar. He had asked for a name, and Jimi had said only, "Just say the guest." Ray Hollis had accepted this with the pragmatic shrug of a man who has learned not to argue with the parts that are working. Jimi walked out carrying Tommy Bridges' Telecaster, plugged in, made 2 adjustments to the amp settings with the speed of someone who has been doing this since 16, played 1 chord, listened to how the room received it, and turned to Colin. "Ready," he said. What happened in the next 40 minutes is the part that people who were there found difficult to explain to those who were not. The first song, he played as if the guitar had been his for years, not as if he was pretending, as if the Telecaster had recognized something in the hands holding it and decided to cooperate fully. His tone was darker than Tommy's, more fluid, but it fit the songs in a way that felt inevitable rather than substituted. The crowd went quiet by the end of the second bar. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way a room goes quiet when something begins that commands attention without demanding it. By the third song, Colin had stopped thinking about his own playing. This was unusual for him. He was a disciplined musician who prided himself on awareness of what was happening around him at all times. But something in the way Jimi was playing required that you simply receive it, that the cognitive part of music listening be set aside for the part that precedes cognition. He was playing the songs roughly as written, but the spaces between the written parts were occupied by something entirely his own. A sustained note held past where it was supposed to end, bent slightly then released. A chord voiced in a way no one on stage had heard before, but that made immediate, irreducible sense. It was not showy. That was the thing Colin kept returning to afterward. For a guitarist who would later become famous for spectacle, the 40 minutes at the Flamingo that night were almost austere. He was not performing, he was solving. Tommy Bridges was watching from the wings through the gap between the curtain and the wall. He had been told to go back to the hotel. He had refused. The fever gave everything a slightly hallucinatory quality that he would later decide was probably useful. It stripped away the part of his brain that wanted to analyze and left only the part that could receive. The sixth song was one Tommy had written himself. He heard it from the wings with his temperature at 102 and understood approximately 40 seconds in that Jimi had found something in it that he had not found himself. Not the melody was there, intact, something structural. A relationship between the rhythm and the chord changes that Tommy had always felt slightly unresolved. A small problem he had never solved. Jimi located it in the time it took to play through the verse once and answered it with something so simple and so correct that Tommy felt it as a physical thing, a small shift somewhere in his chest. He sat in the wings and watched his own song be completed by a stranger, and he did not feel diminished. He felt something closer to gratitude, and underneath the gratitude, something closer to vertigo. The 40 minutes ended. The room was on its feet, not the managed applause of an audience that has been told to clap, but the disordered, slightly stunned sound of 200 people each processing the same experience in private. Jimi set the Telecaster on the stand at the back of the stage, said something brief to Colin, and walked off. He found his jacket, put it on, and went back to his seat in the fourth row. The evening continued. There was a fourth act. The room recovered its normal function. Jimi sat with a second Coca-Cola and watched the remaining set with the same focused attention he had brought to the whole evening. He did not speak to anyone. Ray Hollis found him at the coat rack near the door. "I need to ask your name," Ray Hollis said. "For my records." Jimmy told him. Ray Hollis wrote it on the back of a receipt slip, looked at it, looked at the man who had given it, and understood in the delayed way of a person whose mind has been catching up for an hour. You came to watch a show, Ray Hollis said. I did, Jimmy said. He buttoned his jacket. And then you played the show. Someone needed to. He pushed through the door and out into the October street. Tommy Bridges recovered in 4 days. He returned to the Flamingo the following Tuesday and played the residency through to its end. He was good. He had always been good. He continued to develop as a guitarist for another 15 years and built a career of genuine, modest distinction that he was, by most accounts, correctly proud of. He never entirely solved the problem in the sixth song. He tried many times. He could hear what Jimmy had done with it, replayed in memory enough times that the memory had acquired the quality of a recording. But when he tried to bring it into his own playing, it arrived slightly wrong. Close, but not right. The way a word in a language you've studied but don't speak natively arrives slightly mispronounced. In 1997, 31 years after that October night, Tommy gave an interview to a small music magazine assembling a piece on Jimi Hendrix's early London days. He was 53 and had not been performing for several years, and spoke about music with the precision of someone who has stopped needing to prove anything. I've been asked what it was like to watch him play, Tommy said, and the honest answer is that I wasn't watching him play my songs. I was watching him understand them. There's a difference. I'd been playing those songs for 2 years and I understood them the way you understand something you made, completely, but from the inside. He came at them from the outside and saw things I couldn't see because I was standing too close. The interviewer asked whether it had diminished him in some way. Tommy was quiet for a moment. I went in that night thinking it was my most important night, he said. And it was, just not the way I'd planned. He looked at the window. He showed me what the song was supposed to be. I spent 30 years trying to play it that way. A pause. That's not a complaint. That's what it means to have a standard worth reaching for.